Well, latest opinion polls show that the Conservative Party does have a strong lead over Labour going to this campaign, but Mrs May claims her decision isn't motivated by that or political opportunism. The Prime Minister says it's all about strengthening the country's position for Brexit negotiations. So how are the voters likely to go? Joining me now are Aaron Bastani, who is co-founder of Novara Media, and Mark Wallace, who is the executive editor of Conservative Home. Welcome to you. And Mark, how much of a gamble do you think Mrs May is taking? She tells us she doesn't like to play games. She's not a gambler.
Well, it's definitely the case that she could have sat on her hands and held out until 2020. So she's choosing to go early. You never quite know exactly what voters are going to say, as Hillary Clinton and David Cameron could attest. But of course, she knows in the back of her mind two things. The polls are very, very strong for her, and the fundamentals are very, very strong. The Labour Party is big in members, but is disastrously led, has serious internal discipline problems, and a leader with fundamentally unpopular ideas. What's
the precedent on this? Starting from this position in the polls, has our Prime Minister ever gone on to get egg on their face and lose?
Well, not in my lifetime, sure. There are a few examples elsewhere. We've got Justin Trudeau in recent history. The Liberals weren't doing particularly well. There was a grassroots movement behind him against a very unpopular Conservative. They came from nowhere to win. More recently, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, polling just 10% in France a few weeks ago, now on 20%. Looks very likely to make that runoff. And if he does, he could well be the next president of the French Republic. And of course, 2016, the logic consistently upturned. Brexit, Trump, the Italian referendum, which makes the job for you guys incredibly difficult. Because yes, of course, Theresa May's polling is outstanding, but if you start calling a May win, this could be another case of the media getting it very, very wrong. Not impossible.
What, just explain that a bit more.
In terms of how
we could make a mistake calling it for a May win.
Well, there's so many variables here. You've got 5 political parties. I don't think Labour are looking at opportunities, but I think the Greens are looking at opportunities. Plaid, the SNP, the Lib Dems, the Tories. That's not typical of British politics. We haven't historically had a multi-party system. We've got so many parties at play. We've got a new cleavage, which is Brexit. I don't think it's the big one, like the Lib Dems seem to think it is. I think people still care about jobs and services. There's a new cleavage, multi-party system. It's much more complicated, I think, than any general election we've ever had before.
I mean, Fazl's Islam, when I was talking to him yesterday, and he was making the interesting point that if you go back to 2015, it was more or less a score draw between Labour and the Conservatives. It was elsewhere what happened with the SNP, what happened with the Liberal Democrats that made the difference for the Tories. This time round, it looks much more like a Labour-Tory battle, doesn't it?
Well, I think we have that, but we also have a pincer movement happening to the Labour Party. The Labour Party is going to lose some votes to the Liberal Democrats, who are establishing themselves as a kind of pro-EU UKIP, targeted at university towns, some London suburbs, and specifically the grievances of people who really want to stay in the EU, which is a minority, but enough to make the Lib Dems bigger. At the same time, the Labour Party have already lost some votes to UKIP, and there's signs that some of those voters are planning to move to the Tories. And there's a direct pitch by Theresa May being made to an awful lot of Labour voters who supported Leave, who were personally, culturally, tribally Labour, but actually who've realised in the last couple of years that Jeremy Corbyn's Labourism is not there, does not represent their views, and they've heard Corbynites telling them to F off and join the Tories if they don't like it, so they're thinking about doing it.
Are you seeing that there's much more of a red-blue fight than perhaps in 2015?
I think the two big parties will get a larger percentage of the overall vote, but I do think, because we've got first past the post, because this multi-party system, look at the Liberal Democrats, I think you're quite right. They'll do pretty well, I think, in metropolitan areas. In those seats they lost to the Tories in the southwest, will they do well on this whole Brexit, Remain thing? I don't think they will. I think, actually, what we've seen in the last couple of weeks is a tremendous popularity for Corbyn's policies. The question is, well, we've seen it on, for instance, low pay. We saw it with free school meals.
Well, spending money on giving richer families free school meals is something you
well, we can argue about the merits of universal, universal welfare, but we haven't got time. But they are very popular policies.
But the issue, they may be popular, but the issue is whether they're going to dominate or be salient in the election.
That's the big question.
And Mrs May has pitched this being about her position on Brexit, and as I understand it, extraordinarily, the voters are agreeing with her at the moment. They're saying the number one issue for them too is the EU and Brexit.
As you said, that will be without precedent. This is a general election.
But
this is not a referendum.
That happening at the moment?
Could be. We're only on the second day of this thing. Could well be. Corbyn's big problem is we thought there'd be 2 to 3 years of building a movement behind these ideas, behind these policies, getting the influencers, getting the political candidates, getting the institutions, right, in the media, going out to talk to people, mobilising that mass membership. 3 years I thought was a tough ask. 6 weeks, very difficult, but we make history, but not under conditions of our own making.
So could the irony of this be that Mrs May wins but saves the Labour Party?
Well, that all depends if Jeremy Corbyn would actually go if he loses. There's an assumption that he would, but I see very few signs of that. There are rumours that he's already tried to resign previously, but his close clique, Seamus Milne, John McDonnell, Glenn McCluskey, have prevented him from doing so. There are clear reasons why he might want to hang on, at least until he's changed the rules. To cite a kind of Michael Howard example from 2005, hang on to oversee a change in the leadership election rules. And he could, of course, cite Neil Kinnock in 1987, who stayed, although, of course, Neil Kinnock gained some votes and seats.
What do you think? Will a crushing defeat finish off Jeremy Corbyn?
I think we've got 6 weeks now to talk about policies which will get people enthused, offer a real break with the status quo on falling pay, failing public services, falling or stagnant living standards. That's all I care about for the next 6 weeks. And then let's see what happens after that. If Labour don't do particularly well, I think those policies, regardless, will do tremendously well. Then we can have that discussion. I don't want him to leave. Like most members, I want Jeremy Corbyn to lead the Labour Party, both during this general election and afterwards.
Hang on, if those policies and this leadership lead the party to crushing defeat, surely it is time for a rethink.
It's going to depend on the outcome, of course.
He's going to end up propped up on his bicycle like El Cid of the Labour Party by his enthusiasts who will keep him going forever, regardless of how badly he does. He's like somebody who voters, understandably, I think, are suspicious of his past associations with terrorists.
I think the great British public loves to give everybody a shot. Give the guy a shot. Let's talk about this in 6 weeks' time.
Okay, well, we certainly will. We'll be talking it for the next 6 weeks and in 6 weeks' time. See where Mr Corbyn is then. Thank you both very much indeed for joining us. This is Sky News. We're getting